Imagine a civilization so enigmatic, so steeped in mysticism, that even the mighty Romans, masters of empire and order, sought to erase their legacy from the sands of time. What could the Etruscans have known that posed such a threat? And why does their shadow still whisper through forgotten tombs, ancient symbols, and half-remembered rites? The story of the Etruscans is not simply one of archaeology or forgotten history. It is a tale of sacred knowledge, celestial wisdom, and a powerful cultural force that once radiated through the Italian peninsula like a hidden sun. Before Rome rose, the Etruscans flourished. They built cities aligned with the stars, practiced divination so precise it rivaled modern metaphysics, and held an understanding of life, death, and the cosmos that remains unparalleled. And yet, they vanished. Or so we're told. What if their disappearance wasn't a natural fade into the tides of time, but a deliberate erasure? A silencing of ancient voices whose truths ran counter to the rising narrative of control and conformity? What if the very foundations of Roman civilization, the Senate, the gods, even the architecture, were borrowed, or rather taken, from the very people they would later reduce to a historical footnote? In this video, we journey into the veiled past to uncover the hidden truth behind the Etruscans. We'll trace their mysterious origins, explore their sacred rituals, and unlock the forbidden knowledge encoded in their art, language, and myths. You'll discover why their teachings were too dangerous for Rome to preserve, and how remnants of their spiritual legacy still ripple through our world today, just beneath the surface of collective memory. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a spiritual excavation. Prepare to unearth what was buried, not just by earth and time, but by power and fear. The veil is thinning. The ancestors are calling. And the secrets of the Etruscans are ready to be remembered. Long before the rise of Rome, before the echoing footsteps of legionnaires filled the streets of empire, there was a people whose presence pulsed with a quiet, sacred intensity. The Etruscans, mysterious, refined, and deeply spiritual, occupied the heart of what is now Italy. Their civilization, known to themselves as the Ravenna, flourished between the 8th and 3rd centuries BCE, stretching across fertile lands from the Arno River to the Tiber. But unlike the civilizations that surrounded them, the Etruscans did not shout their power through conquest alone. They spoke through symbols, temples, rituals, and whispers carried on incense smoke. Their cities were not merely places of governance. They were energetic hubs, deliberately placed according to celestial alignments and geomantic knowledge now largely lost to us. While Roman history would later claim dominion over the region, the cultural DNA of Rome is infused with Etruscan blood. The curved arch that defines Roman architecture? Etruscan. The lictors bearing the fasces, the sacred symbol of authority? Etruscan. Even the Latin alphabet, and many of Rome's early religious rites, were inherited from these so-called mysterious people. But to call them mysterious may be a misdirection, a label placed upon a people whose knowledge ran so deep that it became unsettling to the more pragmatic, control-oriented Roman mindset. You see, the Etruscans did not divide the world into sacred and profane as modern thought tends to do. To them, the entire world was sacred. The flight of birds was a divine sentence to be interpreted, the liver of a sacrificed animal a living map of the gods' will. They practiced haruspicy and augury, divination rituals that merged natural signs with cosmic rhythms, allowing them to read fate like a language. In Etruria, Spirituality was not an escape from life but a key to understanding it more fully. Every act, be it farming, building, or engaging in politics, had to be aligned with divine order, a concept they called disciplina Etrusca, the Etruscan discipline. This sacred worldview was incompatible with what Rome was becoming, a machine of law, conquest, and centralized power. As Rome grew, the fluid mysticism of the Etruscans began to feel like a threat, too ungovernable, too decentralized, too aligned with natural forces that couldn't be legislated. And so, quietly, almost imperceptibly, a burial began, not just of bodies, but of beliefs. The language of the Etruscans, once spoken widely, was allowed to wither and vanish. Their scrolls and sacred books, particularly the famed Libri Haruspicini and Libri Fulgurales, were either lost, destroyed, or absorbed without attribution. What Rome could not erase, it absorbed and repackaged as its own. But the deeper mystery lies not just in what was forgotten, but why. Why were the Etruscans' rituals so feared? Why did their knowledge, particularly their understanding of death and the afterlife, become taboo? Their tombs were not grim resting places, but sacred portals painted with vibrant scenes of joy, music, dancing, and transformation. Death to the Etruscans was not an end, but a doorway. They believed in a cyclical universe where the soul moved between realms, evolving through each passage. This perspective clashed sharply with the emerging Roman narrative of glory through conquest and immortality through state power. In essence, the Etruscans held a key to a radically different way of living, one where spiritual awareness governed daily life, where nature was not conquered but consulted, and where the invisible world was not a superstition to be dismissed but a reality to be navigated. This esoteric wisdom, though buried, was never truly destroyed. It lingers in symbols, in fragments of forgotten texts, in the unexplained magnetism of their sacred sites. And now, as consciousness awakens across the globe, the Etruscan voice begins to stir once more, softly, insistently, calling us back to a deeper, more harmonious way of being. To truly understand the depth of Etruscan knowledge, we must step beyond the crumbling stone and faded frescoes, and into the energetic currents that once pulsed through their sacred rites and philosophies. This was not a civilization obsessed with domination, but with alignment. The Etruscans believed that every aspect of existence, every gust of wind, every lightning strike, every animal's cry, was imbued with divine intelligence. Life was not chaotic or random, but a cosmic symphony written by the gods, and they saw themselves not as rulers of the earth, but as interpreters of its celestial language. Central to Etruscan spirituality was a concept known as templum, not simply a temple as we understand it today, but a sacred space carved out of the world through orientation and observation. A templum was created through a ritual process of marking out a space in harmony with the heavens, facing north, south, east, and west, allowing communication between the human and the divine. Within these oriented spaces, Etruscan priests, known as haruspices, would perform rites of divination, interpreting the will of the gods through the liver of sacrificed animals. Far from primitive superstition, this practice was a sophisticated system, a spiritual technology, if you will, through which messages from the unseen realms could be deciphered. The liver, in their view, was a microcosm of the universe, each part corresponding to a deity, direction, or cosmic force. These priests memorized intricate celestial maps etched into bronze liver models, such as the famed liver of Piacenza, which survives to this day as an artifact of astonishing complexity. To the modern mind, these practices may seem strange. But consider this: they understood that the body reflects the cosmos, that the internal world mirrors the external, a truth now being echoed in quantum physics and holistic medicine alike. The Etruscans were not behind the times, they were ahead of a forgotten curve. Their sacred science extended to architecture and urban planning. Etruscan cities were laid out with precise astronomical intent. Streets, temples, and public spaces were aligned with solstices and equinoxes, forming a terrestrial echo of the celestial order. Even their graves, elaborate necropolises carved into rock, were arranged like cities of the dead, complete with roads, dwellings, and symbolic gateways between worlds. They believed the dead lived on, not as lost spirits, but as ancestors guiding the living from the invisible realms. The Etruscans also possessed a profound reverence for the feminine, a reverence that the Romans would later suppress. Their pantheon included powerful goddesses such as Uni, a precursor to Juno, and their art often depicted women not as submissive figures, but as equals, intelligent, sensual, and divine. In Etruscan society, women participated in banquets, owned property, and even held positions of spiritual authority. This balance between masculine and feminine energies was not merely cultural, it was esoteric. It symbolized a deeper harmony they sought to maintain between the forces of creation and dissolution, action and intuition, sky and earth. This understanding of duality, what later mystery schools might call as above, so below, was foundational to the Etruscan worldview. They did not fear death, for they saw it as part of a continuum. Nor did they worship their gods with blind obedience, rather, they engaged in a dialogue with them, negotiating omens, seeking consent before action. The divine was not a distant monarch to be appeased, but an ever-present intelligence with which one could commune. Perhaps most astonishing of all was the Etruscans' vision of time. Unlike the linear, conquest-driven timeline of the Romans, the Etruscans viewed time as a series of cosmic ages, vast epochs governed by divine rhythms. According to some accounts, they believed their civilization was granted a finite number of centuries by the gods, each marked by spiritual lessons to be learned. When the final age drew near, they did not panic, they prepared. They understood that civilizations, like souls, are born, rise, fall, and return again. This cyclical understanding of time wasn't defeatist, it was wise. It allowed them to plant seeds of consciousness that would one day awaken again, perhaps in us, in this very moment of rediscovery. Their knowledge, encoded in ritual, architecture, and symbol, was not meant only for their time. It was meant to survive the silence. To speak again when the world was ready. And perhaps, it is now. But who were the Etruscans, really? The question lingers like incense in an ancient temple, sweet and elusive. The Roman historian Livy suggested they descended from the Lydians of Asia Minor. Others claimed they were indigenous to the Italian peninsula, born of the very soil. Herodotus believed they sailed from the east, guided by divine omens. Yet even in antiquity, no consensus could be reached. The Etruscans seemed to emerge fully formed, already in possession of intricate rituals, advanced metallurgy, and a symbolic language that resisted translation. This air of mystery was not accidental, it was cultivated. The Etruscans guarded their inner teachings, reserving the deepest truths for initiates, veiling sacred knowledge in metaphor, image, and symbol. Their language, though partially deciphered, remains one of the great puzzles of the ancient world. It is not Indo-European, setting it apart from Latin and Greek. Its structure is strange, poetic, layered with meaning. Only fragments remain: tomb inscriptions, votive offerings, the haunting Liber Lentius, a ritual calendar written on linen and wrapped around a mummy in Egypt, preserved not by intention, but by the hand of fate. Many scholars believe the Etruscan texts we have are only the outer shell, the public prayers and formal dedications. The esoteric core, the inner language, may have been transmitted orally or deliberately obscured from the uninitiated. Like the Druids of the Celtic world or the mystery schools of Egypt, the Etruscans understood that sacred knowledge, once exposed to power-hungry hands, could be corrupted. And this may explain why the Romans worked so hard to absorb and then silence them. Rome did not destroy the Etruscans in a single stroke. It was a slow erosion, first cultural, then spiritual. As Rome expanded, Etruscan city-states were absorbed into the Republic. Their temples were rededicated to Roman gods. Their seers were made state functionaries, stripped of mysticism and chained to bureaucracy. Even the practice of haruspicy was retained, but hollowed out, its sacred nuance lost beneath a political facade. What had once been a sacred art of communion became a ritual of convenience, used to validate the Senate's ambitions. Yet the Romans could not entirely erase the power that lay beneath. They feared it. And in that fear, they mythologized it. Roman writers like Seneca and Cicero mention the Etruscans with a peculiar mix of admiration and suspicion. They describe their rituals as foreign, their gods as dark, chthonic forces. The Etruscans became, in Roman eyes, keepers of an older, more primal magic, too powerful to dismiss, too alien to fully embrace. And perhaps this darkness was not malevolent, but rather a reflection of truths the Romans did not want to confront, that power lies not in domination, but in harmony, that death is not annihilation, but transformation, that the divine cannot be owned, only listened to. Modern scholars and spiritual seekers alike are beginning to suspect that the Etruscans possessed not just an advanced spiritual cosmology, but access to subtle energies and dimensions of consciousness we are only beginning to explore again. Their use of sacred geometry, their sensitivity to omens, their mapping of the soul's journey, all of it points to a civilization in communion with the multidimensional fabric of reality. Consider the layout of their tombs, mirroring the living cities, but placed underground, aligned with celestial events, decorated with paintings not of mourning, but of passage, revelry, and rebirth. These were not merely burial chambers. They were portals, stargates, ritual wombs of the earth through which the soul re-entered the cosmic cycle. And this understanding extended into their mythos. Their underworld deity, Ida, is not the tyrant Hades of Greek tradition, but a guardian of transformation. The afterlife was not a punishment, but a rite of passage. Their deities were often androgynous or shape-shifting, reflecting a fluid understanding of identity and divinity. It was a worldview far more inclusive, far more complex, and, perhaps most dangerously, far more liberating than the rigid moral structure Rome would eventually impose on the world. The Etruscans remind us that there was, and still is, another path. A path of intuition, sacred cycles, divine feminine wisdom, and reverence for the unseen. A path that the conquerors tried to bury, but which, like seeds planted in the depths of winter, is beginning to stir again. Their symbols are still with us. Their spirit still lingers in the stones. And when we begin to see not with the eyes, but with the soul, we begin to understand that the Etruscans never truly disappeared. They simply waited. So how do we, in the modern age, detached from temple rituals, living in cities that vibrate not with sacred harmonics but with digital noise, begin to walk the ancient path the Etruscans once walked? The answer lies not in mimicry, but in remembrance. The spiritual technology of the Etruscans was not built solely upon ritual objects or lost languages, but on an attunement to the divine patterns within and around them. That same attunement is not out of reach for us. It only waits for our stillness, our curiosity, our courage to look beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Begin with space. The Etruscans honored the orientation of the cosmos through the templum, carving sacred space in alignment with the cardinal directions and celestial movements. You, too, can create your own templum. Choose a room, a garden, a quiet corner. Cleanse it not just physically, but energetically, through intention, through sound, through breath. Orient yourself to the east at sunrise. Feel how the light enters your space, your skin, your mind. This simple act of marking sacred space activates a deeper awareness. You begin to relate to your environment not as a backdrop, but as a living altar. You reclaim the forgotten truth that space is alive. Next, reclaim your relationship with time. The Etruscans did not view time as a straight line of progress, but as cycles, spirals within spirals, always returning, always evolving. Start noticing the moon's phases. Track your moods, your energy levels, your dreams in relation to the waxing and waning sky. Observe how beginnings align with the new moon, how endings come during the waning phase. Sync your intentions with these rhythms. Over time, this lunar wisdom will begin to recalibrate your inner clock. You'll stop racing against time, and begin flowing with it. Divination, too, was central to the Etruscan way, a sacred dialogue between human and divine. While we may not read livers, we can listen. Begin by developing your symbolic intuition. Keep a dream journal. Pay attention to repeated symbols in your daily life, a bird's cry, a phrase overheard, a sensation in your gut. These are modern omens, and the universe is still speaking through them. Try using tarot, runes, or even simple coin tosses, not for fortune-telling, but for reflection. Ask a question from your soul. Then watch, not for a literal answer, but for what image or thought is stirred in response. This is not superstition. It is spiritual pattern recognition. And finally, remember the ancestors. The Etruscans did not fear death, they honored it. They saw the dead not as gone, but as guides. Create a simple ancestor altar. Place a candle, a photo, a stone, a cup of water. Sit before it in silence. Speak to them, not with your mouth, but with your heart. Ask for wisdom. Ask for protection. Feel the energy shift. Know that you are not alone. Living the Etruscan way today is not about reconstructing rituals from the ruins, it is about rekindling the awareness they lived by. A sacred worldview. A relationship with the cosmos. A reverence for the invisible. You do not need their language to speak to the same stars. You do not need their temples to walk the same earth. You only need to remember. Because deep within you, below the layers of programming and modern distraction, is the same knowing that lived in them. The same pulse that moved through their priests, their builders, their dancers and dreamers. It is not gone. It is simply waiting for your stillness, your attention, your willingness to see again with ancient eyes. The story of the Etruscans is not just a historical mystery, it is a mirror held up to our collective amnesia. A civilization whose heartbeat once echoed with divine harmony, now remembered only in fragmented pottery, buried tombs, and whispers between the lines of Roman texts. But if you listen closely, beneath the noise of conquest, beneath the dust of time, you can still hear it. A pulse. A presence. A voice calling us to remember what was never truly lost, only hidden. The Romans tried to silence the Etruscans, to flatten their legacy into political subtext and architectural remnants. But what they could not destroy was the essence, the living wisdom encoded in ritual, symbol, and the sacred geometry of soul and soil. And perhaps, in some strange twist of fate, it was through that very burial, through the act of hiding, that the Etruscans' deepest truths were preserved, untouched by the corruption of empire. So as we stand at the threshold of a new spiritual renaissance, we are invited not merely to look backward, but to look inward, to listen to the rhythms of the earth, to speak with the stars, to honor the cycles of life and death, beginnings and endings. To remember that wisdom is not always written in books, it is often etched in stone, sung in dreams, and passed down through silence. And so, we leave you with this question: what if the ancient knowledge you seek is not locked away in some distant ruin, but already alive within your bones, waiting to be reawakened? Let the ruins guide you. Let the silence speak. And if this message stirred something within you, share it, reflect on it, act on it. The past is not dead, it's a sleeping oracle. And you may be its voice.